Confident parenting. Is it possible? That's what we're going to look at today. You know, I get up pretty early in the morning, and most mornings about 5:30 in the morning, go out in my front yard and pick up the newspaper. Some of you who are young might not know what that is. It's a little white piece of paper and has some, black writing and some photos on it. But I go pick up the paper, and this one day, somebody was sprinting by. Now, that may not be a big deal to you, but in my neighborhood, that doesn't happen. They walk dogs, they kind of stroll, but really nobody sprints. And this guy, I'm going to guess, was about 19. He had on black pants, black hoodie, sprinting, black shoes, and just taking off. And I was like, wow, what is that? When all of a sudden I look to the right of me, and there's a man chasing him, which was a funny sight because this was a man who's a little bit overweight, and he's only wearing boxers, no shirt, no shoes, and he's carrying a knife, a big knife, like a big kitchen knife, and he's chasing this guy. So I don't know who the good guy is or the bad guy, but I'm backing off because I'm not excited about that knife when all of a sudden the man in his boxers looks at me and says, "Call the police, he's robbing our neighborhood." Well, I need to be honest with you, I've never called the police before. In fact, in our neighborhood, I've never even heard of a robbery, but this was exciting to me. So I went into my garage where I had my cell phone just kind of sitting there. And I quickly called and I said, quick, there's a robbery that's in place. There's a man, and I described the man, and he's running. And then there's another man chasing him. He's just in boxers. He has white, blue, and red, as if that really mattered. When all of a sudden I said, stop. This woman has not said anything except hello. And I said, stop. I said, he's getting in a car. I go, it's going the wrong way, because in our neighborhood, there's only one way to get out, and he's going the wrong way. So I said, if you'll catch him while I see the guy driving past me with the man now turned with a knife chasing the car, which was hilarious. And I said, all you have to do is put cops on Josiah and Jeremiah. We live on Bible Streets. Right on Crown Valley. You got it. It's going to be simple. When all of a sudden the woman says, "Sir, this is 411 phone information. What would you like me to do about that?" I went, "Oh, sorry, I thought I was calling 911. And she said, "Well, I would suggest that you would call 911. And so I hung up, called 911, as I see the guy coming past me again, and he ended up getting away. The moral of the story was this. He did get away, by the way. But the moral of the story was, I had the right motive to make the call. I just called the wrong number, see? Well, when it comes to confident parenting, I think we all have right motives, but many of us call the wrong number. Let me explain. I mean, none of us are really confident parents. I mean, it's kind of an oxymoron. It's like diet ice cream. I know they have diet ice cream, but it never tastes as good as the real stuff, okay? And I was a confident parent until I had kids. And then as my kids even got older and older, then my confidence level kept going down and down instead of up and up, okay? But personally, I feel like, well, more like Lilo and Stitch in the Disney movie. This is my family. It may be small, it may be broken, but it's still good. And I think that's how a lot of us feel. But what I want to say is you can be a confident parent, okay? Now here's a scripture with a great promise, and it definitely ties into becoming a more confident parent. The Bible says in Proverbs 22, it says, "Train up a child in the way that they would go, and when they are old, they will not turn from it." It doesn't say you're not going to have problems. It doesn't say you're not going to have bumps along the road, but it says train. So a lot of where we probably make a mistake is we don't train. We don't have the discipline as parents. And so basically, the question I have for you is, are you parenting by circumstance and chance, or on purpose with a plan? Now, unfortunately, for many of us, we're just trying to make it to Thursday. I mean, let's be honest. And then we wake up on Friday and we realize we have to do this all over again. Well, in this course, I want to take a step back and help you develop a strategy and a purpose to become a more confident parent. And I think that's really kind of where the secret is. When parents have a plan, and when they have a plan in place and they are intentional, well, they tend to do much better. And if you're married and you can get in agreement at least on most of the strategy, then that's going to help your marriage big time. If you're single, if you can co-parent, and again, this doesn't always work, but if you can co-parent with the same strategy, then you'll do, well, much better. So that's what we're talking about. Don't expect to always be on the same. My wife and I are probably 80% together and 20% not together, but what we've done is realize that the strategy is what's key, okay? Now, first, let me say this. If you happen to come from a dysfunctional family background, and I mean, nobody comes from the biggest dysfunctional family and nobody comes from the perfect family, but if you do come from a dysfunctional family, then you can become what I like to call the transitional generation, okay? And you can overcome negative family patterns. I think a lot of us who came from dysfunctional families, I did, my wife Kathy did, that meant that we didn't have the confidence to be, well, confident parents because we kind of didn't know how to do it, okay? So Kathy and I met in college. It was the very first day. I was sitting in the nerd section, back where the nerds sat, and she was sitting in the second row, and I said to my two new nerd friends, see that woman down there? And they said, yes, she's beautiful. I said, one day I'm going to take her out on a date. They looked at her beauty and they looked at me, well, and they laughed. And I think they said, yeah, right. But long story short, we started dating and we got married 1 week after college graduation. We thought it was going to be easy. Both of us were tied into working with kids. Our joy was to help kids succeed. And so we were both in youth ministry, and we thought it would be easy because we were Christian, first generation Christians from our family, as well as, loving kids and being in ministry. It was not easy. In fact, that first year, it was really tough. I was a youth pastor, and Kathy and I then would be driving to the church where I would talk to the kids, and we would be arguing, and actually even considering divorce and wondering if this was the craziest thing we'd ever done. And then, of course, I would go and speak to the kids on the joy of a Christian family, feeling, well, hypocritical. About 1 year into the marriage, we decided that we were going to become a transitional generation. We made up those two words. And what that meant was that you either recover or repeat the sins of a previous generation. For example, the Bible says that you inherit the sins of a previous generation to the third and fourth generation. And for us, we weren't totally with those same sins, but the truth is that we were going in some of those directions, and we just kept misfiring. And so we put a stake in the ground and we said, we're going to recover, and we'll do whatever it takes to recover. And you know what? I would say it's one of the greatest things that have ever happened in our life. Maybe making a commitment to Jesus Christ, marrying Kathy, and then deciding to recover. Now, we don't have it perfect, and I want to kind of fast forward the story just to simply say that my daughter Christy, when she was 17, so we made that decision before we had kids. Now she's 17, and she's getting ready to go off to college. And she was driving us nuts. Now, she was the president of Fellowship of Christian Athletes. She led the worship band at our church for high school, but truly, she was kind of driving us nuts, her attitude more than anything else. And I remember one day I came home from work, and Kathy was in the kitchen, and she was with Christy, and they were having a big discussion. Actually, I should say Christy was having a big discussion, and she's saying, Mom, furthermore, and this and that. So I did what any good passive-aggressive father, husband, would do. I stayed in the other room, and I listened. Okay. And wow. Some of the things she said about Kathy, I thought to myself, that's true, but I wouldn't say that to your mom. Okay. Finally, she totally went overboard, and I walked in and I said, Christy, you need to go to your room. And when I said that, I thought she was going to turn to me and say, but Dad, you are the greatest and you are the most amazing. But instead, she turned on me. So now it's personal. It wasn't personal before. I almost wanted to just scream and yell, but I didn't. I just kind of quietly said, no, go to your room. So she walked out of our kitchen door. We have a sign that says, bless this house. She slammed the door and the sign went crooked. We've just left it crooked, by the way. So I followed Christy upstairs, and she had slammed the door, so I knocked on the door and then just opened it. And I said, Christy, I want to talk about Mom for a minute. And I said, first of all, actually, some of the things you said to Mom, about Mom, they're kind of true. I mean, nobody's perfect. I said, at the same time, I never want you to talk to my wife like that again. And Christy's eyes got all big, as if she was just realizing that not only was she Mom, but she was also wife to Dad. And I said, and let's talk about Mom. I said, your mom is the woman in my life, and I mean this with all of my heart, who has grown the most. I've never seen a woman grow as much. She came from a real dysfunctional family. I didn't have to go into all that because Christy already knew. She was 17. I said, so she started in deficit land. I put my hand out like this, and I said, so she's grown to here. And, it's pretty remarkable. I said, when we first got married, about a year into the marriage, Christy, Mom and I were aware of a scripture that says you inherit the sins of a previous generation to the third and fourth generation. And we were doing that. I mean, it wasn't good. I didn't have the stuff with my family. She didn't have the stuff with her family, but we're sure going in a bad direction. So we put a stake in the ground and we said, we're going to recover and not repeat. And we have gone about for all of our life, including your 17 beautiful years, to try to recover. And I'm not saying we're perfect. I mean, you've obviously just said we're not. But I think we've done a pretty good job. And so your mom started here, and she's going to here, and she continues to grow because that's the woman that she is. So that, you know what, Christy? You can start somewhere in the middle, and you can go farther than us, farther than we've ever gone, if you choose. But mom is the one who's breaking that chain of dysfunction. And so the question I would have for you is, will you recover or repeat those negative family patterns? I mean, it's hard to do, but it's well worth it. Now, I want to give you just a couple of thoughts on recovering and how to become a more confident parent in this first section, and then we'll get into your kids. But let's first talk about you. First of all, I think you have to admit your own brokenness. I don't know that I did that at the beginning. You have to be ruthlessly honest about what's holding you back. Do you have work it takes right now to kind of get a handle on that? Are you aware of what's holding you back in terms of being that confident parent? Is it something that came from your past, and is there something that you can do about it? And that's the first step. And the second step is you've got to develop the courage to change. For me, that meant to stop blaming someone else, namely my wife, and realize that there were some changes that were necessary. What would some of the changes in your own life and in your own parenting be that would hold you back from really going in a great direction? I think you probably know. And so if you know, then what will it take for you to get past some of that so that you can really be the confident parent? Because if you don't deal with some of the past, you can never get to the present in a good way. Thirdly is, do you establish replenishing relationships? We were not meant to do life alone. We are better parents and spouses if we're married to have people in our life who are replenishing relationships. See, I call them VDPs or VIPs, very draining people or very inspiring people. Very draining people find us and we find them, but very inspiring people, we need people who will replenish us. Don't do parenting alone. If you're married, do marriage alone. You know, I've been in a small group of men for 18 years, and I know that I'm a better husband and a better father because of those men in my life. You know, when our kids were smaller, when they were younger, Kathy and I were in a couples group for at least 7 years with people who were kind of going through the same stage in life with the same age kids and marriage and whatnot, and we would kind of lean on each other, totally replenishing relationships. But again, the best parents are the parents who lean into replenishing relationships and they realize you don't do it alone, okay? And then lastly is just simply live by the eternal perspective. Those were the 4 traits that kind of helped us work through the recover or repeat. And to recover, we needed to have the eternal perspective, to realize that God is a part of our parenting and God is a part of our marriage. You know, parenting and doing life in general with an eternal perspective really puts our life in a better perspective. And we make decisions differently, and we prioritize our life differently, and we actually parent our children differently. So anyway, let's look at some lessons today on confident parenting. And let's look at a strategy. So we're taking a step back to look at a strategy for how we can be confident parents and actually help our kids through all that process and doing that with an eternal perspective.